Hi, thanks for being in a new video. This time I have full review of the Vivo V50. Let's start. This device is part of the premium mid-range Vivo, although it has a price really high-end entry, but from my point of view there are some things that make it cannot be considered a high-end device or even entry. Its launch price in Mexico has been 16,999 pesos, more or less $730, although remember that the prices here are not the same as those in Mexico. From there, this is the only version that will be available in the country, featuring 12 gigabytes of RAM along with 512 gigabytes of storage. In both of these parameters, we see something truly worthy of a flagship device. However, in other aspects, not quite as much. It's important to remember that the price also includes insurance that protects you against theft or even accidental damage, and it provides an extended warranty. But you should always verify all of this where you plan to purchase it, due to all the terms and conditions involved. Nevertheless, if they offer you these things, it's worth considering. Moreover, if you accidentally drop it and the screen gets damaged, they offer a repair service with a minimal deductible payment. This is an attractive feature that other brands might not offer in this price range. Its main competitors are the Galaxy S24 FE and the Xiaomi 14T Pro. These competitors surpass it significantly in various aspects, therefore I genuinely believe that this device struggles to compete directly in terms of price with these models. In fact, both the Samsung and Xiaomi devices excel in numerous aspects within this price range. Occasions are on more attractive discounts, then you really have a very difficult task. But let's analyze it point by point. For starters, the distribution is a little more widespread than previous years, as it is available in the official Vivo store, in Mercado Libre, Amazon, Telcel and Liverpool in Mexico, so you might also find some promotions out there, but Vivo does not usually give so many discounts. Let's begin by describing the design. In this case, the front features some glass that has been crafted using Scott Sensation. However, the manufacturer hasn't officially disclosed the specific version of this glass, which leaves us with a bit of uncertainty about the potential resistance it might offer. Despite this, they assure us that it holds the SGS certification for resistance, boasting a 5-star rating in drop tests. So, at least in theory, it should be quite resistant. However, I would advise against actually putting it to the test. Here in the front, we will notice bezels that are relatively minimal. Although, to be honest, this doesn't appear to be its most striking feature or anything extraordinary. However, we will see a very gentle curve on the sides as well as at the top and bottom. The factory-applied mica, though, doesn't give a premium feel when sliding over it, but on the bright side, we do gain durability. So, it's up to you to decide what you prefer. Clearly, you have the option to completely remove that mica if you prefer. The frames themselves are going to be constructed from plastic. Naturally, this will be a major point of criticism, especially considering we're discussing a device that is quite costly, and seeing these types of materials can leave us feeling entirely let down. On the right-hand side, there are the volume buttons along with the on and off button, whereas at the top, you will locate the microphones and the output for the secondary speaker. The left side of the device is entirely clean, offering a clear profile view that allows us to appreciate its thickness, which measures 7.67 millimeters. Moving to the bottom, we can find the slot designated for the SIM card, and in this particular case, it accommodates just one SIM card. Alongside, there are additional microphones and a grill for the main speaker, as well as the USB-C port. The device weighs 199 grams, which positions it as neither particularly light nor heavy. The back cover is crafted from glass, featuring an effect known as changing strategy that is It's quite subtle, yet when viewed from certain angles, you might notice some intriguing reflections. This cover I have is the blue edition, but there's also a purple version available. Additionally, on the back, there's an interesting camera module design. It features a small tab that extends downwards from the module to accommodate the aura light, which we'll discuss in more detail a bit later. However, in terms of design, I feel this device doesn't stand out significantly. Personally, I don't find the choice of materials particularly appealing, but fortunately it does come with IP69 and also IP68, which ensures excellent water resistance. Interestingly, there are many more costly devices that only offer IP68. However, this device is part of a new wave of products that are starting to include enhanced resistance. Although it's worth noting that the camera doesn't include an underwater photography mode, unlike some other devices with IP69. It seems that it doesn't fully utilize that superior level of water resistance that it possesses. The screen has a diagonal of 6.77 inches, so it is very wide. It offers us a resolution of 1080x, 2392 pixels. The level of detail is guaranteed. Its density is 388 pixels per inch. Small text and everything will look good. although it is not of the densest screens, but for the distance at which we usually see the screen, we will notice a good detail. In this case, it loses a bit of density, mainly because it is a wider screen than the market average. So if you are a fan of large screens, this is definitely one of those devices you might enjoy. The screen features AMOLED technology, which will provide us with vibrant colors, high contrast, and everything we have come to expect. In this particular instance, the manufacturer provides 3 distinct color calibrations, allowing you to select the one you prefer. Personally, I find that I like the default option, but there is also a manual adjustment for color temperature if you desire it, along with an enhancement option available. YouTube and Netflix compatible visuals to optimize colors, contrast, and more, although it does increase power consumption, which is why it is turned off by default. In this case, it does not have an automatic white balance adjustment like True Tone or something similar, and regarding the brightness, it reaches a peak of 4500 nits. Watching HDR content, then it is a really very bright screen. Then, for example, on YouTube, if this HDR option will appear. But curiously, it is not compatible with the HDR from Instagram, even though its camera does take advantage of this kind of technology, allowing, for instance, in certain photographs, some areas to emit more brightness. This provides a sensation of increased realism. However, this is quite challenging to demonstrate in a traditional video. You would need to see it live to truly appreciate it. The minimum brightness isn't excessively low, but thankfully, there is the option for extra dimming within the accessibility settings. This ensures you can enjoy a comfortable experience, especially if you combine it with other adjustments. The display is also equipped with an eye protection mode and dark mode, which of course are also available. Finally, the screen is 120 Hz in its refresh rate, so it does meet what we would expect in such an expensive device, showing us fluid movements. It must be said that it has an intelligent setting that will alternate between 60 and 120 Hz, or you can manually choose the setting you want. Regarding the sound, as anticipated, when we find 2 speakers, the complementary speaker primarily provides medium frequencies. Consequently, the sound quality does not reach the high standards one might expect from a device in this price range. The sound is perceived as somewhat simpler. Additionally, it does not offer us a software equalizer to customize and optimize the sound to our preference. Let's hear a brief test, but remember, it's not like live listening. Through its software, the manufacturer includes a feature known as Super Audio Resolution, designed to enhance the definition of the sound you are listening to. Additionally, there is a section called Listening Experience Customization, which is meant to conduct a brief test to enhance your perception of the audio through the headphones. While it does not include Dolby Atmos, it does offer a feature called Super Audio, which provides some similar presets. The device also comes with some intriguing features that are not found in other cell phones, such as a per-app volume setting. This feature is uncommon among manufacturers, yet it allows you to control the volume of each app independently. Therefore, if you are playing games while listening to music, you can, for instance, choose to make the music a bit softer. You have the flexibility to adjust the volume of each application according to your preference. It also includes a feature known as audio redirection, enabling you to play sounds from certain applications on your speaker, Bluetooth, or another accessory, while keeping sounds from other applications on your cell phone. This means that at a party, you could play music on your speaker while watching a video or listening to a WhatsApp audio on your phone, without worrying that it would be heard on the speaker. Of course, you need to configure it properly. So as you can see, it comes with good software features that complement the experience well, but the fact that it doesn't have an equalizer bothers me. It also has no headphone jack, which was expected, but if your priority is audio resolution in music, it has the aptX codec, aptX, adaptive and LDAC, and in conjunction with the super resolution mode, I think it would give you a good experience listening to high-definition music. If you don't want latency, you'll need to use USB-C headphones or an adapter. This device includes 2 microphones. It goes for the basics. Let's listen to a test.
Esta es una prueba de audio grabada con los micrófonos del Vivo V50.
Obviously, the voice in such a scenario is picked up well. The device also has a voice isolation mode available for calling applications. In fact, you can select which applications this isolation will be used with and which applications it will not. Let's try turning it on and off to form our conclusions. First, listen to the ambient sound that I will play for you.
Hola, estoy probando el efecto de aislamiento de voz activado, a ver cómo se escucha. Dale, vamos a probar ahora con el efecto desactivado. Hola, ahora está desactivado el efecto de aislamiento de voz, a ver si hay alguna diferencia. Dale, gracias, nos vemos.
I'd love to hear your thoughts, but in my view, with the voice isolation mode, it even tends to saturate the sound of my voice a little. And without the isolation mode, it still offers noise cancellation, so I don't notice a significant difference. Now, let's proceed to test how it performs in much noisier environments. As you notice, it does not saturate or distort the sound excessively, so it maintains a good behavior overall. And finally, let's talk about the vibration motor of this device, which is located on the Z-axis. This results in a rather poor experience, especially when you consider that mid-range devices are now incorporating motors on the X-axis. These X-axis motors provide a much more premium and refined feedback in the hand. In this particular case, the vibration will feel quite cheap, even though it's not as bad as some other motors that are so loud you can even hear them when they're activated. Typing on the keyboard, but unfortunately, it's not quite what one would expect. And in that regard, it disappoints a lot. The front camera boasts 50 megapixels and features a very wide 20mm lens with an f2.0 aperture, which is extremely bright and also includes autofocus. It is strategically positioned at the top center of the screen. The truth is that this camera is indeed very attractive and will surely be one of its strongest selling points, although soon we will take a look at its results. Regarding the experience, keep in mind that the device allows for a quick launch of the camera by pressing the volume down button twice. However, it opens in a special mode that features a few buttons, reminiscent of instant cameras. This feature looks quite interesting and attractive. But remember, there isn't a shortcut available for when the device is unlocked and you're using another app, which means you can't quickly access the camera in that scenario, which might be a bit inconvenient. A great deal of versatility. Notice that when you use the front camera, it immediately prompts you to choose whether you want any beauty style or prefer to maintain the original effect. The camera presents us with various levels of amplitude and even provides digital zoom capabilities. However, one thing I dislike is that it automatically switches to portrait mode instead of remaining in photo mode. Yes, in portrait mode, we gain access to more options such as blur effects, but we need to be cautious to ensure this effect is activated or off. Because if it's turned on and you're trying to take a picture that includes a landscape, then the landscape will end up being out of focus. So, make sure to pay close attention to this detail. Personally, I am not a fan when manufacturers implement features like this. In the traditional photo mode, you'll find color filters, but the drawback is that you cannot preview them in real time. Meanwhile, in portrait mode, you'll notice facial beauty effects, which, as you might realize, come with additional specific parameters, like smoothing. There are options for skin tone, whitening, and many more features available. So when you adjust all the settings to their maximum, you can appear as artificial as you desire. By swiping from the bottom upwards, you can access this vintage camera I mentioned, which opens with the shortcut of pressing the volume button down twice. Here you also find beauty effects, although with fewer parameters. Additionally, you can modify the type of frame you'd like your photo to have. Even more, you should note that you can edit the text you wish to add to your photo. We'll include, and you have the option to attach your location, date, and time. Each one features its own editing sections. You can also choose one with a completely blank frame, selecting from various colors or styles. Additionally, it offers several color filters, allowing you to give a vintage touch to your photos. You can use it not only with the front camera, but also with the rear camera. Interestingly, when you're using the vintage camera mode, you do get the self-timer button right here quite quickly. However, if you're not using the vintage mode, the self-timer option will be a bit more hidden over here. But ultimately, it is available right here. It's important to note that in this scenario, the device responds well to quick and snappy shots with the front camera. Although it doesn't include the burst feature in selfie mode, and in this particular case, it unfortunately doesn't offer gesture capture or the ability to move the shutter. So you could use the volume buttons exclusively for a slightly easier capture when the shutter is hard to reach. It should be mentioned that the front camera really performs quite well, with colors appearing natural. We have a good level of detail and even a nice level of width with this lens. If you want a closer setting, you can narrow the angle to 26 mm, and you will still appreciate a great level of detail thanks to the high-resolution sensor. You could actually apply digital zoom to the picture. And when you combine the advantage of having digital zoom with the capability of autofocus, you could achieve incredibly detailed pictures with this front camera. This is definitely one of its main advantages, and the point where it can compete most effectively in backlit scenarios. The preview might still not look very well optimized, but fortunately the final result does balance highlights and shadows much better. Indoors, it retains good color rendering. A very good level of detail, in fact it especially stands out for detail despite not having as much light. And at night it continues to give a very good experience. And I love that it is a wide camera that also retains a good aperture. Most front-facing cameras on the market have f2.2 aperture. In this case, it is f2.0, and that small difference does seem to show with better light entry. Take note of how, even in backlit night shots, we achieve a good result. Although it loses a bit of the usual detail in this kind of scenario, it still performs well. In fact, even when taking portrait shots at night, the images turn out very well, with sufficiently high detail, a natural blur, and of course in partnership with Zeiss there are various effects and blur styles available for you to select the one you prefer. However, you'll notice that the wider style doesn't respond as positively due to the cropping effect. It generates, so there's not as much detail. Also note how on the day we notice that it doesn't keep objects in focus, and this is definitely a weak point. Despite having a very nice bokeh effect with different styles, Zeiss would not consider it to be an expert in front portrait photography because of this small flaw of not keeping objects in focus. On the back, we will find two cameras. First, a 15mm ultra-wide with f-aperture 2.0, and also autofocus, featuring a 50-megapixel sensor, along with a 23mm main camera with an f-aperture of 1.88. It includes autofocus, optical stabilization, and another 50-megapixel sensor. Naturally, photos in auto mode will be 12.5 megapixels. But if you wish to utilize the full resolution, the high-resolution mode is available for both cameras. It's important to note that the device will respond swiftly to these rapid shots. If we hold down, we will discover a burst with a limit of up to 20 pictures. This is one of those devices that, in some way, anticipates the moment when you press the shutter. In our tests, as we tried to capture number 3, we found that it almost always captured an instant before the photograph. Therefore, you don't need to worry too much about pressing at the exact moment. It seems that this is a positive feature. However, the burst takes more than half a second to begin. However, it provides a sufficiently brief interval between images to capture the precise moment. Keep in mind that this device features an aura light, which is different from the conventional flash used in other cell phones. You can manage it via the same flash indicator. And in this instance, it's important to note that it also allows for adjustments in both its intensity and its temperature. In fact, it includes an automatic sensor. So if you're in environments with warm lighting, this aura light will also adjust to become warm, matching the environment. It will occur when you're in cold light settings, or if you're not satisfied with how it detects automatically, you have the option to adjust it manually. The aura light serves as a key differentiator for this device, as it has been for several years. However, now it's a bit brighter. As I mentioned, with this manual control, you can still opt for the traditional flash on or choose auto flash according to your preference. In addition, there is another button available here that provides us with various types of color rendition options included in this device, allowing you to select the one you prefer the most. By default, it comes with the vivid setting, which is the one we use for all our photographs. However, if you wish, you can choose another setting with texture that enhances the contrast slightly more if you prefer this style of photography. Alternatively, there is the natural setting, which features slightly paler tones, developed in collaboration with Zeiss. Additionally, it features a macro mode that you need to turn on manually. While most devices come with an automatic mode that triggers when they sense you're very close, instantly switching to macro mode, this one requires manual activation. Furthermore, in the lower right corner, there is a small button for applying color filters with adjustable intensity. However, you can't preview these filters simultaneously. By tapping the screen, you can adjust both focus and exposure, and it also offers a professional mode in this instance. You have more advanced controls, allowing you, for instance, to manage the exposure or its compensation. Additionally, you can adjust the ISO up to 3200, set the shutter speed up to 32 seconds, and tweak the white balance, focus, and metering type. This device indeed permits photography in RAW format, which is beneficial for a slightly more sophisticated color management during post-development. Furthermore, it still retains the 3 color rendition types that we saw available in the automatic mode. Finally, regarding smart captures, keep in mind that it doesn't recognize QR codes from the automatic mode. However, in the camera settings, you can enable this option, which is disabled by default for some reason. Once activated, you don't need to open Google Lens to read QR codes, even though there's direct access to Google Lens in the upper left corner, where you can also perform this action. And for the documents, we have identified a special mode, because the automatic interface cannot detect them. However, one positive aspect is that it allows us to use the ultra-wide camera, which means you don't have to be very far from the document to scan it properly. It's worth noting that it instantly detects the edges, but they are just cropped photographs. It no longer allows you to add pages or export them to PDF, nor can you apply optimization. So, it functions as a relatively simple scanner. Let's take a look at the results now with these cameras. You'll notice that both the ultra-wide and the main camera offer a very similar color rendition, which I absolutely love. Pay attention to the ultra-wide camera, it provides a good level of detail. While it's not entirely free of chromatic aberration, which is somewhat expected, especially in this price range, I do think it would be nice to see an image with a bit higher quality. However, we can overlook this due to the excellent aperture it has, which once more is brighter. This is not quite as good as the ultra-wide cameras found in most cell phones. The main camera provides us with excellent image quality, representing colors accurately and showing details well. Even with the 2x zoom crop to achieve the 46mm perspective, it still makes a commendable effort to maintain optical quality. However, when we observe the full range starting with the ultra-wide camera, then moving to the main camera, and finally to the 46mm crop, up to this point, it maintains good quality. Then, we have the short zoom. Distance is acceptable, but keep in mind that in photography, using a 5x zoom begins to significantly reduce quality. With a 10x zoom, quality continues to diminish even though some optimization attempts are made. The maximum zoom is 20x, but it definitely presents us with very poor image quality. Therefore, the zoom capability is quite limited, especially given the price range it competes in. This is one of its weakest aspects, because even at the 5x zoom setting, it lacks good quality. I would say that the maximum zoom should probably be 4 times, and in such an expensive device, this is almost unforgivable. Indoors, the ultra-wide camera doesn't deliver a very high level of detail, but the main camera does, even though it's not spectacular. Finally, when cropping the image, detail is also lost. Interestingly, despite having good apertures, it seems to reduce its performance in less illuminated scenarios. In backlight conditions, it's important to note that the preview isn't well optimized. However, fortunately, the final result appears well optimized. Even the ultra-wide camera doesn't display as much chromatic aberration. The main camera also delivers a good result, and even when applying the 46mm crop, it still shows a good outcome. At night, it is observed that the ultra-wide camera performs spectacularly, balancing lights and shadows effectively so that the most illuminated areas aren't overexposed, and it sufficiently controls chromatic aberration. Noise is significantly reduced, even though some artifacts do appear. However, if you don't get too close, the picture quality remains very good. The main camera also performs with high quality. Even in the darkest areas, we can appreciate a good level of detail, with slight grain that isn't unusual, and the result is positive. However, when applying the 46mm crop, it can no longer maintain the same level of detail that it did during the day. If we frame without some light present, you will notice that the ultra-wide camera also performs quite well. This spot is actually the moon, which moved a little bit, but notice that in the sky, we see no artifacts or anything similar, and it even shows good color saturation. Evidently, the main camera maintains and indeed improves the performance we observe in these types of dark scenes. Although with a 46mm crop, the colors will be a bit more distorted and will generate more overexposure. In macro photography, this is the closest you can approach with the main camera. Clearly, it isn't specialized for this purpose. As you can notice, the focus isn't uniform, concentrating on specific areas. Thankfully, the ultra-wide camera comes with autofocus, allowing you to utilize macro mode with this camera for capturing a high-quality image that's quite detailed and straightforward. Get close up, and if you prefer being far away instead of very close, take a look. Now, this is the ultra-wide perspective, and then we have the panoramic mode. Although it does not allow us to use the ultra-wide camera, which would have helped us gain more detail, at least it provides us with a panoramic photograph that has a good level of detail. It maintains the good color rendition that we had previously observed in the traditional modes. As for moving pictures, it's important to note that in good light conditions, with either of the two cameras, we would achieve a correct capture without any swept elements. Even when applying the crop inside the sensor, we observe a result. However, if we're in shadowy areas or environments with lower lighting conditions, even the main camera will display elements that appear swept, which leads to a negative experience in this regard. This occurs with the automatic mode. But if you switch to a mode called Instant on the camera, it will enable you to capture movements with good definition, even when you're in indoor scenarios or in situations with limited lighting. The camera is lower, but it only lets you use the main camera, not the ultra-wide camera or any kind of zoom. Finally, for portrait photography, it allows us to take pictures from different focal lengths, which is obviously positive, although it would have been better to have a telephoto camera. To get as much detail as possible, since in this case it will apply cuts within the sensor, fortunately it detects well the objects in the foreground, but it notes that the level of detail is quite low, especially when you consider that most portraits tend to look more professional with the telephoto perspective. It does offer us access to several size options for different blur effects. However, I don't believe that the quality of portraits is particularly good, mainly because of the low level of detail that this perspective provides us with. At this price point, it's clear that there are devices available with much better capabilities for portrait photography. Despite all of this, it's worth noting that you can also take portrait pictures of objects, and in this particular case, at night, the outcome was quite nice. It had a good level of detection in terms of its depth. However, the level of detail might sometimes fall short of what we are used to. When it comes to video recording, we have 8K available at 30 frames per second. This is accessible for both rear cameras as well as the front camera. Additionally, you can record in full HD at 60 frames per second across all cameras. The resolution selector and settings are quite easy to navigate and very understandable. In fact, you can even adjust the default quality for both the rear and front cameras, which means you won't need to constantly change it to your preferred setting. It's worth considering that recording in full HD is more optimized, allowing you to switch between cameras smoothly and providing better stabilization. However, given the price range, we conducted our tests in 4K, as that is the level of quality you would expect from a device like this. Expensive. In the lower right corner, you'll find options like cinema-type recording with blur created with Zeiss and facial beauty effects with adjustable settings. Both effects only support full HD. When recording video, there's a zoom slider that can be frustratingly slow. Even if you slide it fully, the movement is not as quick as expected. It's rather slow, so if you want to move with a little more agility, you'll need to use 2 fingers. There is also a button to take pictures while recording, which is quite handy. Additionally, there's another button to control the aura light, which can be quite helpful and useful for adjusting the temperature. We also discovered another button that activates noise cancellation during recording. Furthermore, there is a button to switch to the front camera, but keep in mind that this option is not available when recording in 4K. When we start recording in full HD, this button will appear available, allowing us to show our front camera without interrupting the video recording so you don't miss anything. In this situation, for manual controls, we only have the exposure and focus control by touching the screen. It does not have a Pro mode specifically for video, but it does have a micro movie mode that lets you save time in editing as you just choose the template you want. And observe that masks begin to appear on top. The first time you utilize these templates, it is necessary to have an internet connection to download the essential resources. However, I believe they offer fascinating masks that are divided into different categories. I must emphasize, just fill them with videos that you are capturing in real time to have your video already edited. So, if you enjoy simple editing without complicating your life, this might also assist you in generating content or preserving memories. It would be significantly better if it allowed us to edit the text within some templates. However, in this instance, you are unable to do it that way. Fortunately, you do have the option to save drafts. So, for example, if you were recording a video and suddenly decided to take additional pictures, there is no issue because you can resume your content later. This feature provides a way to edit while recording, which can be quite useful or appealing to many users, especially since it offers a wide variety of templates for creating content. And it is something that typically does not come with other devices, which is why I believe we can emphasize it as a significant advantage of this cell phone. However, when exporting videos using applications like CapCut or similar, you might find it takes considerably longer than one would expect at this price point. Here, we are observing a result with 8K resolution at 30 frames per second. In this instance, the stabilization is disabled, although by default, the stabilization is usually enabled. Obviously, the level of detail is positive. In 4K, it records well, the colors also look well represented. Although it does not allow us to switch to ultra-wide camera while we are recording, we must cut and restart. Now you are seeing the result also in 4K. At 30 frames per second with the ultra-wide camera, as you notice, it generates a little more chromatic aberration, though it still maintains a good color rendition, and without the stabilization, you take advantage of the full width of this lens. However, it is clearly not advisable to record without stabilization. You can observe how, even just by walking, the movements become quite pronounced. And obviously when you run, the effect is even more exaggerated, but the device comes with two stabilization modes integrated. What you're seeing now is the standard mode, although in any case it creates a somewhat odd movement, similar to what you might notice when the lens is refocusing, which is not very pleasant. Although it offers some help when you're walking, even if the face doesn't seem particularly interesting when you're running anyway. And finally, the ultra stabilization mode also produces this effect similar to refocusing, as it significantly crops the sensor, resulting in a substantial loss of range. When you're walking, it's adequate, but when you're running again, it appears to be lacking. Indoors, the ultra-wide camera tends to produce a bit more noise, along with some fluctuations in the exposure, and even shifts in the white balance, which make the device less appealing. For recording, in slightly more complex situations, the main camera behaves much better. It will give us a little more stability in both exposure and white balance, and a better level of detail even in these scenes. In backlighting also behaves well from the ultra-wide camera, where we see a good balance of light, highlights and shadows, although we do perceive a little chromatic aberration, but there are not too aggressive jumps in exposure, even if the face is not too bright. When it's closer, you won't notice that the image appears burned out. With the main camera, we will also find a commendable performance regarding the balance between light and shadow. However, the focus might occasionally drift, creating an impression of a video lacking in high quality or detail level. Additionally, the focus adjustment takes a considerable amount of time in such scenarios. At night, I appreciate that the ultra-wide camera manages noise excellently, unlike many other, even pricier devices, where the ultra-wide camera performs quite poorly. However, when there are sudden changes in exposure, like when a light source appears, it might struggle even more. In much darker scenarios, you might notice that it even creates a flickering effect, which appears a bit strange in certain specific areas of the video. Later on, it seems to be somewhat better optimized, but it's definitely evident that night video won't be one of his strong points. If we switch to the main camera, if it will look better. In fact, note that recording in full HD, if it allows us to make this change between cameras, but recording in 4K with the main camera, the result is very nice. It does not have as much lighting as in full HD, but I like it, although there are times where again comes to overexpose, giving a less natural result than desired. It is clear to me that he is not an expert in recording video for Zoom. I remind you that recording in 4K you cannot. Switch back and forth between the two cameras and observe that the maximum zoom capability is 10x. Fortunately, the transition is smooth, which is quite nice. However, the detail level at maximum zoom isn't great. If you want to zoom in or out more quickly, you must use two fingers. Otherwise, the zoom will be extremely slow. So, it really depends on what you prefer as a user. Personally, I would have liked the option to move quickly from the same slider, but as I mentioned, you need to use two fingers for that. Using two fingers, the focus is not going to respond very quickly with the main camera. In fact, when there are fast movements, it might have the best reaction. However, during more subtle movements, you will notice even more sluggishness, and you will observe that it does not focus as accurately. Interestingly enough, the ultra-wide camera seems to perform a bit better at focusing. Although it is somewhat slow either way, it at least appears to be a bit more accurate in its focusing. The device also includes a fast motion mode that fortunately does support 4K resolution. However, the reality is that you don't really see a highly detailed video because it lacks stabilization. The most basic setting is 15x, which might still be too accelerated for some, even though the fastest setting can reach up to 960x. This can be appealing for capturing landscapes, although the focus doesn't maintain very good quality, resulting in a significant loss of detail. The device will also integrate slow motion. In this case, it can be full HD at 120 frames per second, which would maintain a good level of detail, but the video looks very low contrast, or it can also be at 240 frames per second, but further reducing the resolution only to HD, completely disappointing in its slow motion quality. And observe that it also has a portrait recording video mode. In fact, by default, it uses a size mode that is going to give you a ultra panoramic perspective. However, as the video is in full HD, it does not provide us with a level of detail that is very exciting. Fortunately, it maintains the effect applied even if it does not detect the face. It does not appear to change its intensity based on distance, making it a relatively simple mode. Fortunately, it seems to remain focused on the objects, but the edges, however, appear quite cloudy. Additionally, it includes a natural mode that provides a perspective not as wide as the size mode, yet it behaves in exactly the same way. Unfortunately, the front camera stabilization is poor. It does offer a very wide frame with a good level of detail, but the stabilization is not very helpful when recording while walking or doing similar activities. Of course, if you record in Full HD, the stabilization will improve, but I prefer testing them in 4K, especially considering the range. It's quite pricey. Thankfully, the focus is a positive aspect, because you have the ability to zoom in on something and display it with great detail. Even when using digital zoom, you can still enhance the detail level of what's shown by the camera. In backlight conditions, you'll notice it performs well. And fortunately, it doesn't seem to give too much priority to the face, so it avoids excessively overexposing the brightest areas. If it had improved stabilization, I believe it would be excellent, but I haven't been completely satisfied with it. Completely. However, the light management is done correctly. Even in indoor scenes, it maintains good lighting with accurate color and detail, although the backlighting performance is not as spectacular as we might have hoped for. At night, you can notice that even though there is some noise present, it still maintains a good level of detail. However, the darker areas might show a slight purple or blue tint, making it less spectacular. At times, it can also give off a slight greenish tint, so that if you need better lit scenarios to achieve a good quality video front. Additionally, it also supports dual recording mode. Interestingly, by default, it records in HD, so be cautious because it will result in a poor level of detail. You can record in Full HD at 24 frames per second, but the movements won't appear very fluid. It doesn't allow you to adjust the frame once recording has started. It has straight corners, and you can zoom in and out, although it requires using 2 fingers, and it maintains the zoom level as you adjust it. Autofocus is enabled. Before you start recording the video, you can adjust the size and position of the floating frame, but I must emphasize, it has to be done beforehand. It also offers a round picture-in-picture recording mode, which you might find more appealing, and another mode shaped like a heart. However, this heart mode only functions vertically, as there is no option for rotation. Lastly, there is the split screen mode, and before recording, you can modify the spacing of each half then, to record, and it cannot be moved. The software includes Android 15 and Fontosh OS 15. The manufacturer promises 3 years of software updates and 4 years of security patches, which is decent, though not the best on the market. Let me share some features of this device, starting with customization, offering access to various themes as you notice. Some come pre-installed and you can access a store to download more content. In some cases, this includes lock screen customization and even icon customization. However, some apps don't have custom icons, which might make your device look a bit inconsistent. But it's good to have several customization options, as you can specifically modify the icons. Interestingly, it actually lets you adjust the rounded corners if you prefer that style. Or if you want the icons to be completely circular, it offers that option too. Moreover, it allows you to modify the size and even remove the labels if you wish, providing excellent customization options. Like many Android devices, it also lets you change the color palette and the shape of the quick settings icons. Additionally, it includes the always-on display feature. As you will observe, it functions as a small faceplate that lets you display a bit more information on the clock. Additionally, there are various covers you can choose from, featuring their analog or digital clocks or even your own custom text. By default, it is set to activate when you touch the screen or lift it. Interestingly, despite being named always on display, it doesn't actually remain on the screen all the time. Eventually, it turns off, and you will need to touch the screen if you wish to view the content again. While it does save battery, I find it interesting that it's called that, even though the screen isn't actually on all the time. Regarding the lock screen, it's important to note that it offers a bit more customization, allowing users to select the clock's layout, its typography, and the color it includes. Additionally, if you opt for one of your photos, you'll notice that you can activate this depth effect, which allows the image to subtly appear above the clock. On the home screen, you can apply blur effects if you prefer that style. You can also decide if you want an app drawer and customize the animations or grid layout. The device offers a simple mode for a user-friendly interface geared towards older adults and includes a section for changing animation styles. This operating system stands out as one of those that offers a higher degree of customization, especially when it comes to animations. It allows you to select your preferences and also includes a variety of environmental effects. For instance, it displays a subtle overlay on the screen's edges to create animations when you're playing music, when calls come in, or when you receive notifications. Moreover, it provides options to alter the style of animations and adjust their speed, whether you're opening applications or unlocking the device. And more, even lets you change the device's loading animation to your favorite, as well as the USB connector animation. The device also features a split screen function activated by sliding 3 fingers on the screen in compatible apps. allowing 2 apps to run simultaneously. In addition, the applications stay connected in the list of recent apps. You have the option to adjust the size as needed, and you can also rearrange their positions in this manner. Furthermore, you can switch to a floating application mode using this sidebar. With just one touch, we can access these applications and modify their size. However, it only permits us to have one application open at a time. Thankfully, both YouTube and Instagram support this feature, which is quite convenient. In floating mode, you have the option to minimize them by sliding them to the side. This action will bring up the applications you've been running in floating mode. This sidebar has the capability to display the 2 most recent apps you've used, providing a more intuitive multitasking experience. Additionally, you can choose the opacity level for this small tab to suit your preference. It also offers a super screenshot feature, where a simple swipe down with 3 fingers enables you to capture a screenshot effortlessly. Additionally, if you have a long capture, it can display more content than fits on the screen. This section also lets you customize screen recordings by choosing the audio source, image quality, and whether to show notifications, among other tools. It includes gestures to activate the screen or keep it on while it detects you watching, and gestures to quickly answer calls when it detects your attention. You can bring it close to your ear or smartly switch between speakerphone and earpiece just by using gestures. Additionally, you have the option to turn on the flashlight while the screen is on, even if it's on the lock screen, by shaking the device. However, it would be a much more intuitive gesture if you could perform it without needing the screen to be on. So, I'm not entirely convinced, and actually, in this scenario, it turns off in a rather curious manner. You press the button once to lock the screen, and then you press it again. Once more, the power button will, by default, activate the Google Assistant. However, you have the option to change it to bring up the shutdown menu if you prefer. Additionally, it features the Easy Touch tool, which enables you to display a floating menu that includes several shortcuts and tools. And you can completely customize these shortcuts and tools, and even personalize the aesthetic appearance of this menu by choosing your preferred option and applying it. This level of customization is something that other manufacturers typically do not provide, so this is a fascinating little detail for those who enjoy more complex customization options. Notably, it includes a one-handed use mode that you can enable through a specific process. Admittedly, it may be somewhat challenging to activate, yet once done, the screen is effectively minimized both vertically and horizontally. This feature proves to be very useful for single-handed operation. Additionally, it allows you to adjust the size of this mini screen, ensuring the device provides beneficial features. This adaptability indeed enhances the user experience. In this regard, the device additionally offers a beauty mode feature for video calls, which is compatible with WhatsApp and several other apps. However, it does not work with Google Meet, Zoom, or similar platforms. It's important to note that when you join a video call, a floating button will appear, allowing you to select the level of facial beauty enhancement it will apply. Furthermore, it includes a function to use the flash as a notification for incoming calls, and it also incorporates this dynamic light feature to utilize the aura light in notifications. For incoming calls, you can even synchronize to the rhythm of the music with compatible applications. This is definitely another feature that you can use to personalize your experience on this cell phone. Additionally, it includes a task timer which functions somewhat like a routine. However, it only lets you set the phone to vibrate mode, switch to airplane mode, or create a countdown for vibrate mode. It's important to note that it isn't highly advanced. On the home screen, there's a unique Spotify widget called Nano Player, which isn't found on other phones. Interestingly, it also includes a compass, unlike other phones. In the gallery, you can press and hold on an object or text to extract it, which is useful for creating other content. You can also select multiple photos to make a collage or a short video. It's straightforward, as it includes an additional editor, allowing you to add themes, music, filters, text, and various other features without needing a subscription or dealing with watermarks. Regarding artificial intelligence tools, be aware that we will discover an AI eraser. In fact, there will be multiple choices available here. It could be a simple blur effect, or one enhanced by artificial intelligence, or even a button that directly identifies individuals who might potentially ruin your photo. If just one person shows up in the center, you'll recognize that this person is indeed the protagonist of the photograph. However, if you're aiming to eliminate them, observe how you can encircle, and it promptly makes the accurate detection. Keep in mind it needs an internet connection, so it might take a bit of time. But afterwards, it uses generative artificial intelligence to fill in and accomplishes it correctly. Take note that the outcome is positive. And please take note that if you're aiming to perform some very close cropping of your photo, and you notice that it seems to have lost a bit of detail, there's an option in the same editor called Repair. This feature will optimize the details with artificial intelligence to enhance them. However, it does require an internet connection, so you'll need to wait a bit longer. Once it's done, you can see the results. I believe that in this particular case, you can really notice a difference in the sharpness and clarity of the image. Inside the voice recorder, we will discover various artificial intelligence tools that are designed to transcribe your recordings efficiently and also create summaries of all the content discussed. This feature is particularly useful when you're in any meeting or having any discussions, although it does require an internet connection to function properly. Additionally, in the sidebar, there is a feature called on-screen translation. However, it actually connects with Google Lens to perform the translation, which makes it a much more advisable option in that scenario. Use Google Circle to search, included with this translator button. Notice it instantly shows the screen's text in your language. You can also point to an object to find more info online through Google. I like that it includes Circle to search. It also has Google Gemini, a feature on all Android devices. But if you were not aware of it, allow me to introduce you to it. It's an artificial intelligence assistant with which you can converse just like you would with any other person. It will understand context and much more detailed information. And not only does it have a text mode, but it also includes a call mode, which we are going to try out below. Hello, you are appearing in my video review on Vivo V. Please tell me, in very specific points, 3 of the things you like the most. It's great that you're doing a review of the Vivo V50. This phone is incredibly complete. If I had to choose only 3 standout features, they would be its high-resolution front camera, perfect for selfies and clear video. Calls, the rapid battery charging, which lets you have the phone ready to go in just minutes, and its sleek, modern design. What are your thoughts? Well, alright, I respect your perspective. Could you say goodbye to the audience? Sure. Thanks for letting me participate in your review. I hope you like this small intervention. See you. For security, we will find a fingerprint reader inside the screen, which is optical. I think that in the price range, we could already start asking for a slightly more advanced reader. In this case, the recognition will not be exaggeratedly fast as in the ultrasonic readers, and that light that emits could become uncomfortable to some people at night, but the recognition is good and supports 5 registers. In addition, through the settings, you already know that we are allowed to modify the animations both at the time of displaying the reader and at the time of recognition, so it has good options. It also includes facial recognition, but it is only in 2 dimensions and also allows us to change its animation at the time of making. This recognition, just consider that the device does not bring so many tools in a security suite. For example, while it does not feature a secure folder, it does allow us to block access to certain applications by requiring a fingerprint verification before granting you access. Additionally, it includes a tool that lets you clone applications, enabling the use of 2 accounts on a single device. Though bear in mind that not every application supports this feature. Moreover, it provides an option known as application isolation. This feature allows you to run applications that might be unfamiliar or potentially risky within a secure environment, ensuring your safety and protecting you from potential threats. Can manage to extract your data or any other sensitive details. The device also provides the ability to hide apps from the home screen, and to reveal them, you must swipe up on the home screen using 2 fingers, provided this option is enabled. It does not include a private VPN or a child mode. However, it does feature a security scan against malware in collaboration with Avast, in addition to Google Play Protect. And since I brought up Google, if you're interested in exploring the security options it offers in partnership with Google, similar to all other Android devices, there is a link in the description where I explain additional features such as extended unlock, pinning apps, and more. However, the only aspect it appears not to integrate are privacy controls and secure Android browsing. The battery boasts a capacity of 6,000 mAh, which indeed sounds substantial, but, we shouldn't just get carried away by that. For the battery capacity, but we do several tests. In our first test, trying to discharge the device as fast as possible, it actually performed like a 5,000 mAh battery on other devices. This gives us to understand that the processor is very powerful, but also consumes a lot of energy. So in very heavy work, the battery is not going to be so spectacular, although I would not say it is a bad battery, but with 6,000 milliamps, we expected to see more than 5H and only yielded 4 hours with 14 minutes. In the second test, it went up to 7.5 hours, even though it constantly closed the background drainer completely. So, let's say it is quite aggressive in handling tasks, running in the background to prioritize battery life. So, if there is an app that keeps closing unexpectedly, you should go to the battery settings, select the app, and change the optimized setting to an unrestricted one. However, let's just say there's really no balance with improved optimization. In our test, where we played YouTube videos from 100 to 0% with the screen set at 50% brightness, it almost reached 21 hours. which was remarkable in this regard. I believe the battery life will be satisfactory unless you engage in highly demanding tasks for extended periods. However, there are only a few devices that have managed to surpass 20 hours of YouTube video playback, and this device nearly reached 21, so I consider its battery a positive aspect, although, well, you might know that the battery life is dependent on your daily activities and usage. Moreover, there's the standard saving mode available, which can assist you in prolonging the battery life even further. Then there's the super saving mode, which is particularly useful in emergency situations by limiting many more functions of the device. This mode is especially appealing when your battery is running low. Additionally, the device is capable of supporting charging at 90 watts. However, it's important to note that fast charging is turned off in the default factory settings. So in our initial test, it reached 30% in 15 minutes, then went up to 58% in 30 minutes, and completed a full charge in 58 minutes, which is quite decent. However, if you look at the graph, you'll notice it never exceeded 34 watts. This means that even though it's a 90-watt charger, it doesn't seem to fully utilize its potential power. In this first test, with fast charging enabled, you'll observe that it maintains a slightly higher power level, but it's still far from the 90 watts that the charger is capable of supporting. In fact, in 15 minutes, it charged up to 28%, which is 5% less than when fast charging was turned off. After 30 minutes, the result is similar, reaching 59%, just 1% more than with fast charging turned off. The complete charge was finished in 52 minutes, a difference of 6 minutes, which doesn't seem like a significant factor to me. Unfortunately, it lacks wireless charging and reversible wireless charging, features that most of its competitors will likely offer. However, the good news is that to address battery deterioration, we are introducing smart charging capabilities along with a charge lock feature. The connectivity is excellent as it supports both 5 grams and Wi-Fi 6 networks, ensuring fast download speeds. Furthermore, it includes a data blocking mode. And through the manager application, you can choose which applications will have access to the internet using your mobile data and which ones will be restricted, preventing any unwanted data consumption. The bad news is that it does not bring support for eSIM, and definitely in this price range that is unacceptable. So if you want to add any data plan, you must necessarily buy a SIM card, and when you go traveling, that becomes a bit more of a hassle. It also integrates Bluetooth 5.4 and NFC to make mobile payments. It has OTG, although its USB port is 2.0, so it won't offer such high transfer speeds, and the OTG comes turned off, so when you want to use some. To use the accessory, you need to enable that option. As anticipated with devices in this price range, it lacks an FM radio but offers wireless screen projection. This projection is advanced. It can be a complete mirror if desired. Yet you have the option to hide notifications on the projected screen for privacy. Alternatively, you can choose to project only images, videos, or music while continuing other tasks on your phone, or you can project specific apps. So you could be doing anything else on your cell phone while the projection is happening, and even if you want to preserve battery life, the cell phone screen can be turned off during this projection. It cannot project via cable, but it can connect to Android Auto. Now, regarding the sensors, something a bit unusual occurs because you have an accelerometer, geomagnetic field sensor, orientation sensor, gyroscope, and more. Yet the proximity sensor, curiously enough. The proximity sensor is not detected through test applications, but when you make a call, if you are going to notice that the screen turns off, then I do not know exactly the behavior. It is something that had not happened to me with other cell phones. Then the proximity sensor. Let's say it is rare, but at least in the basic test I did, it seems to work and seems to be virtual since it is not activated with any specific movement, but only when you bring it close to your ear, so these virtual proximity sensors might end up failing somewhat in environments with more noise and more waves circulating around. In this context, the experience hasn't been completely satisfactory at 100% internet. It's important to note that it lacks infrared for universal remote control, which we do find in Xiaomi and some other brands. The live ecosystem is still being developed, and in Mexico, it doesn't have a significant presence yet. It does include some wireless headphones, a watch, and a tablet, but they don't appear to have highly advanced interaction technologies between them. The sole Vivo technology featured on this phone is Easy Share, an application designed to enable file sharing across multiple devices. However, it's important to note that this application needs to be installed on other phones as well. Generally, Vivo tends to let Google take the lead on its phones when it comes to ecosystem matters or additional services. Thus, like all Android phones, it will utilize Fast Pair for connecting to compatible headphones, Quick Share for file sharing, Google Drive, and Google Home. All Google services, just like on all Android devices, will be available here. However, what I mean is that Vivo doesn't create its own services to gain a bit more independence from Google. As a result, you won't notice a strong ecosystem, nor does it offer advanced interaction with computers or anything similar, at least not right out of the box or with everything already set up. Therefore, you will need to rely on third-party apps to connect and perform more advanced tasks. Let's go to the performance test by opening many applications. This device has the Snapdragon 7 Gen 3 processor, which, despite being of the 7 series, on many occasions of the performance very similar to the 8 series, so it is a very good processor, accompanied by 12GB of physical RAM and also 512GB of internal storage. In this case, it took more or less 2 6S to open each application. I had a little stumble when opening Spotify, so I tried to compensate a little, but overall, if it provides us with good performance, clearly not at the level of today's high-end devices, but comparable to high-end devices from 2 years ago or even last year, then we are experiencing excellent performance. With so much physical RAM, you won't notice applications restarting or anything like that. Therefore, it is a device that will sustain a very high level of performance, even when you have multiple applications open simultaneously. It also mentions that applications needing extensive graphics processing will perform exceptionally well. There don't appear to be too many complications, unless it's an extremely demanding effect where the device will indeed need more power. However, most effects will still look quite good. Interestingly, you can also choose which apps you want to appear blurred in the recent apps list, although the blur is relatively light. But returning to the topic we were discussing, it actually has 12GB of RAM, which we can turn off if needed, although they are enabled by default. One of its greatest strengths is having a storage capacity of 512GB, which is truly impressive. Additionally, it includes various tools to clean up your WhatsApp, remove duplicate photos, and delete videos that have been around for too long. Furthermore, it offers tools to compress videos, clean WhatsApp audios, and generally includes a variety of tools. It even offers an option to compress applications that haven't been used for a while, allowing you to save even more internal storage space. Therefore, storage is definitely one of its most robust features. However, now let's take a moment to thoroughly test the speed of this storage. It seems to me that it performs adequately, providing noticeably high peaks in speed. Although, at times, it might experience some drops, which means it doesn't always maintain a completely fast experience. However, it is sufficient for a decent number of users, just like the right speed, which doesn't go beyond 40 megabytes per second. Now, let's proceed with a practical test. We will edit a video in CapCut, export it in 4K. Keep in mind that we're utilizing clips recorded with this cell phone in 4K, which altogether have a total duration of 1 minute. And there you have it. It took 2 minutes, which is quite disappointing. I am not certain whether it's because of storage speed instability or perhaps a lack of compatibility with this video editor, but I will give it another attempt and try using a different editor. So, now we will switch to using LumaFusion. It is a project with precisely the same videos, and we will also export in 4K. Let's see how long it takes. And there you have it. It took 1 minute and 18 seconds, which is an improvement over CapCut, yet still a somewhat disappointing duration. It appears that this processor is not particularly efficient at encoding videos. When it comes to games, we will encounter an intriguing feature known as Ultra Game Mode. This is essentially a specialized manager where you can choose which games you prefer to have the additional options that I will demonstrate shortly. In this part, I'll provide a bit more information about the details of the added functions so that you can comprehend what each of those buttons is intended to do, in case you desire a much more comprehensive explanation. Regrettably, I don't have any games installed that work with the vibration feature this device offers. Also, it allows you to block notifications and mute or answer calls in the background while gaming. To prevent interruptions, a small side tab appears for accessing these extra options during gameplay. It's important to note that this feature allows us to open applications in a floating mode, which means we won't interrupt our game while we respond to a message or do something similar. Additionally, there's an option called the Performance Dashboard. This dashboard displays CPU and GPU consumption, and it also lets us choose the performance mode, whether we want to prioritize power or save battery. Moreover, it actually allows us to manually adjust the refresh rate if that's what we prefer. Also, as you can see, it comes with the network selectors are available, ensuring you know exactly what is activated. Additionally, it lets you boost the screen's touch sampling rate, leading to quicker responses. Furthermore, we will also discover the esports mode here, which effectively blocks any sort of interruptions while you are gaming. Moreover, there is a button that allows you to modulate the voice and alter the microphone style in games that support these types of voice chats. We will also discover an option to disable additional gestures, which helps prevent unwanted touches. and calls from being answered in the background. It also allows for complete blocking of notifications. Moreover, we can choose to automatically reject calls if we so desire. Additionally, there is an intriguing feature known as motion control. By activating this feature, we can map buttons that exist in a virtual format and use them through movements. For instance, by tilting the device, I'm going to activate one of them and place this button where I want it. Here, I set it to reload the weapon. Notice that with this gesture, I can reload the gun. However, it seems the button isn't placed accurately, so I'll adjust it and that's it. Let's take a look. It appears that there are some issues with the rotation as well, but eventually, it was activated. You notice yourself that sometimes the rotation might activate unintentionally. So, let's check again. There it goes. It's a gentle gesture. It doesn't have to be an aggressive gesture, or else you might end up rotating the screen. But, as you can see, these types of movements can be utilized to enable those additional buttons. I really wish we had the ability to map the physical buttons too, but unfortunately, that option isn't available. Additionally, we can find the view optimization option, which allows us to slightly adjust the colors. However, to be honest, I don't notice a significant difference. Moreover, we have another option for sound effects, where you can modify the style of sounds available here. This can be useful if you prefer to enhance the voices or choose from other sound styles. You also have the option to block the automatic brightness. We are going to find the option that allows us to show the game in a pop-up window. This feature is quite useful because it allows you to leave your game temporarily to do something else, but you don't lose sight of what's happening in your game. You can easily resume it later in full screen mode. Additionally, it comes with the option to dim the screen while the game is downloading content, which helps in avoiding excessive battery consumption. Finally, you have the options available to take screenshots. We are going to see the screen recording, but let's go to the tests. In Call of Duty, by default, this device gives us the high graphics quality at a very high frame rate. We can turn the graphics quality up to the very high level, and we can also turn the frame rate up to ultra, but the graphics quality drops to the lowest level. So let's say something balanced will be very high graphic quality at maximum frame rate, giving priority to graphic quality. It's important to point out that it provides us with all the effects we desire, including the experimental functions, which are also available. With this configuration, the performance was not just good, but very good. In fact, we could confidently say it is excellent when considering its stability. Additionally, it offers us impressive graphics and more features. However, while recording the screen, it might seem like the frame rate per second drops slightly. Keep in mind that in this situation, we conduct the test separately. Overall, though, it manages to maintain a solid and consistent performance. I don't believe that 100% of the focus will be on gamers, but if you enjoy playing games occasionally, it will still deliver solid performance without causing the phone to overheat, at least in this initial test. We prioritize fluidity by increasing the frame rate per second, and in this instance, it managed to achieve up to 90 frames per second, maintaining practically 100% stability. This means you won't encounter too many issues when playing in this fluid manner, even though the graphics are at the level. The temperature is still the lowest possible, so it's not an overly complex test either, but it's going well. However, another time recording gameplay, again recording the screen, the experience was not so good, so if you want a cell phone to record gameplays or something like that, I think this option will not be so recommended. In Legends, we put it to a slightly higher test than we would expect, setting the graphics detail to ultra at 60 frames per second to see what the processor was capable of. And thankfully, it complies quite well, although it does have some minor moments of low performance peaks. However, this is common across all phones when playing this game, so it isn't truly a serious issue. It's important to note that a smooth experience is generally maintained. The temperature is somewhat controlled, but it already starts to show signs that in more demanding games it could become even hotter. Nevertheless, the overall experience has remained positive. In SpongeBob, by default gives the resolution and high quality at 60 frames per second, and there we kept it, and again, the performance was good. In this case, even recording the screen was not seen to have too many complications or something like that, and I insist that it is not a 100% device focused on gamers, but considering the additions it has at the software level and the good performance it gives, I think it would also give a good experience to many gamers who do not want to sacrifice. There was an excessive focus on the front camera or other aspects. Eventually, we tested Henshin Impact. Initially, it was set to low graphics quality by default. However, we increased it to a high graphics level at 60 frames per second to evaluate its performance. In this scenario, the result did exhibit slightly more instability in the graphics. Nevertheless, for the majority of the time, it stayed above 45 frames per second. Therefore, it doesn't really provide a particularly bad experience or anything of that nature, even though screen recording might struggle a bit more. In highly demanding and complex games, you'll notice it lacks power, but for most content, you'll have a good experience. In conclusion, this device would be more competitive with a lower price. At its current price, we can expect a telephoto camera, wireless charging, better sound quality, aluminum frames, and a few other features. It's not that it's a bad device or anything like that, but at its price point, it faces very tough competition. Fortunately, it comes with features like IP69, which offers a very high level of water resistance. The screen quality is good, and the front camera is of very good quality too, with both autofocus and digital zoom. It also provides good tools for content creation, especially if video editing isn't your thing, because while you're recording, the device can automatically add some elements that other cell phones simply don't offer. You must add later during the editing process. The battery life will be sufficient if you are not someone who engages in heavy activities, and the performance will be quite good for a large number of users. However, if you are a gamer, you might want to consider more powerful alternatives. It will also stand out significantly due to its 512GB of storage, making it difficult to fill up. Additionally, it comes with a good warranty as Vivo provides insurance against theft and other issues. Overall, for the price makes it difficult to compete. Hopefully you might find it at a discount. For now, this is all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you know you can show it, and we'll see you in the next one.